Now, it's very important that you stay positive throughout your job search and your job journey, because it will pay off in the end. It really will. You're terrific. You're going to do great. And hopefully this course has really helped you in a lot of great ways to prepare you for interviews or to, make your documents like resumes or LinkedIn, whatever it might be, really shine. So, stay positive. But sometimes you might wonder, and I get asked this, I've been asked this, is why doesn't the best candidate always get the job? It's true. Sometimes you'd be like, I'm a terrific candidate, but they gave it to this other person. And particularly, if you're an internal candidate, like you're going for a job and somebody from another department is, and you know that person, and you're like, why'd they give it to her or him when they should have gave it to me? Understand your perspective is always, you're going to think of yourself in a better light than maybe your competition there in that respect. But sometimes it happens. Is why doesn't always the best candidate get the job, especially for these external job searches? Well, there's several reasons for that. One actually is people don't apply. That's one thing. You're not going to get a job if you don't apply. And sometimes people talk themselves out of applying for a job because they read the job description and say, oh, I'd be a perfect fit, except for these one or two things. And so they don't apply, where maybe those one or two things weren't as important as the job description laid out. So when in doubt, apply, because you can't get a job if you can't get the job unless you apply, right? So do apply. The other thing that happens why the best candidate doesn't always get the job is they don't implement best practices. They haven't learned the game and how the game is played, and they get screened out. Think about back through this course as you learn things in interviews or applications or whatever, all throughout, we talked about the screening process, how people get screened out, how people don't write things to be easy to scan. All these things, they're not implementing the best practices. They could be at the end the best candidate, but they never get even to a hiring manager or even to an interview because they're getting screened out because they're not implementing these best practices that you've been learning in this course that you can apply. So it's very important that you apply what you have learned. Another reason is that some things are out of your control. You might be the great candidate, you might be the best candidate, but some things happen that are out of your control. Maybe they have an internal candidate and they'd rather promote from within, and that's their company policy or desire, and so they promote that internal candidate, even though you might be the better person, but you're outside the company now, so they give it to the internal candidate. Or a company might all of a sudden, you're going through the process, and you think you're going to get a job offer, and they institute a hiring freeze. So sometimes the best candidate doesn't get the job because nobody's getting the job right now because the company's fallen on hard times, or something has happened that they've instituted a hiring freeze and everything's at a dead stop. Then you want to continue following up with them, but that's out of your control too. You can't control that. You can just do the best that you can do. I think in addition to not applying, this kind of relates to it. The number one reason why the best candidates always get the job is persistence. Sometimes the person who gets the job they're just so doggone persistent. They just keep trying. I know people I've hired that, I may have interviewed 3 or 4 people and it's a longer process and I might be down to, the final 3 candidates, for example. And one candidate just, maybe wasn't the top candidate at the time, but they just stood out because they kept following up. They kept sending me thank you notes. They kept calling me. They just were sharing information with me. They were just that persistent. And that's a very admirable trait, right? So persistence can make all the difference. Being positive and getting through the whole process, using your best practices and things you've learned in the course, but in the end, sometimes it's just a matter of being persistent and sticking with it, even when it seems really hard to do.